Welcome to my talk, shortly and sweetly called Building New Products and Business. It's a bit of a mouthful, sorry about that. I just realized that it's a bit too long after sending it down to the guys, but I think we'll deal with that. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Zbigniew Sobiecki, and I will spend a couple of seconds to explain where I'm coming from, so you guys get the context. Because it's important, I feel, for the rest of the talk. So, I've been spending quite a bit of time with code in a various contexts so far, either writing it myself or building teams and companies to do so. I've dabbled in many different weird things, and that gave me a bit of frustration because I wasn't pretty good at none of those things, so I felt like, maybe I should rebrand to a generalist, which I've done, and now everyone claps when I say that. Don't do that. I've co-founded 5 companies. I'm focusing on completely new ventures most of the time, but that being said, I've written 0 books. Forbes also forgot to include me. I'm actually hoping to, if they start doing Forbes 70 after 70, I'm hoping that this is going to be my time. I will actually have some time to do something else than work. And my talk is going to be based mostly on practice, not theory, not that one is better than the other. It's just I have no idea what I'm talking about, so theory is off the limits for me, obviously. And it's just observations from where I sit. So whatever I'm going to say, I by no means feel like are absolute, undisputable truths. It's just what I see when I do stuff that I do, and your mileage may vary, obviously. So just one last slide about me, I promise. 3 of my experiences are pretty important to this talk specifically. I've been leading Macoscope, which was a software development house. We were working on mobile apps for mostly US startups for 8 years. So we've done both code and design and stuff like that. Then I moved to product. I always wanted to do product. So with my co-founder, we started a company that connect chatbots to HR in Southeast Asia and try to leverage markets there to bring people, blue-collar workers, some work. And now I'm at Arabella, but I'm sort of trying to mix both worlds. By both worlds, I mean service, where we work for money to generate software to build products, and companies that are trying to build products themselves in-house. So this is sort of like a mix of the both above. I'm hoping that title of this talk is getting some shape and that starts to make sense. I'm going to be talking about new products, businesses, and code, and I feel like no presentation is worth having without diagrams. Pyramid diagrams are specifically cool. I couldn't exactly decide whether it should look like this or more like that. I don't know. Clearly, something is off there. So I figured, maybe something like that is going to be better. And by technology, I actually mean both code and design. So whatever we do to produce artifacts that users actually interface with, that they interact with, I mean. Product is, figuring out what to build, when to build, and stuff like that. Those terms are loosely held in my head, so don't count on me defining the borders between them. Specific ones, and business is everything around it or in between, essentially, to make the company work and continue and not die somewhere. And I will be talking about specific types of businesses. So ones that require code and design and stuff like that, mostly startups and new ventures, and 2 approaches to building them. One is with external partner that builds them for you or with you, and the other is where you build everything in-house yourself. So we have lots of those companies in Poland that are called either software houses or agencies, basically places full of developers that produce code, and there are agile coaches, and there are designers, and there are UX people, and various other roles involved, but they are mostly focusing on the technology itself. So this is their core expertise, if we apply the broader definition of that, and that focus should be reflected in them, in how those companies are actually built. So it goes for employer branding, so whatever we say out to the outside world, how great the developers that we currently have are, how great mentors are they going to be for you, how we hire, so we check whether those developers are really great, though these designers can really produce great output, and marketing, so hey, you know, our prospective client, we're working on this great technology, why don't you come up and work with us, the organizational structure, so everything is technology driven, the technology stack is chosen by geeks too, just because this is how those companies came to life more often than that. More often than not, you know, there are a couple of guys writing code, building products, and there's more and more guys, and at some point they figure out what the name is going to be of that company and they run with it. So this is how many of them have come to life. It influences the process, obviously, so as those companies mature, they start thinking about agile, they start thinking about product, they start thinking about whether their customers' business is going well or not. The culture is important because it's obviously effect of all that, effect of the people that you're bringing in, effect of the how do you hire them, and so on and so forth. And sales, you know, we sell different services, specific services, so how do we do that, and what sort of game are we getting ourselves into? And this is actually pretty important, what happens next, how do we manage clients' expectations, and how do we sell those things. So how are they usually sold? And I'm going to oversimplify here a little bit, but just bear with me. So, you know, at some nice day, someone comes along and says like, here's my brilliant idea, and you know, whatever you need to know about it, here it is. There's a brilliant Excel file with all my features or user stories or whatnot. And here's the stack that my friend CTO has chosen. And look at my mocks and stuff like that. So, you know, how much? I mean, just send me the quote, send me the number. When you do that, it's probably how much again, really? Because people don't always realize how much this stuff actually costs. And on the other side is, you know, we respond with questions. Maybe we'll hold a workshop with those people, do some user story mapping, service blueprint or whatever. But more often than not, it's just like, you know, here's our senior developer, here's our designer, or something. Here's our great process, and then, you know, we're going to build a backlog and put it into Jira, and you'll get invoices and the timesheets, and the client looks at it and he's like, well, yeah, I guess it looks good, it looks legit, so yeah, why don't we start? Why don't we kick things off? And we do. So there's a designer that starts designing mocks and wires, and you know, maybe there's a UX guy somewhere in there, and there's developers that develop, and agile coaches that agile coach, I guess. And you know, the reactions are pouring in Slack, so everything is okay hand, and everything is muscle, and everything is thumbs up, and everything is fire. But if we structure the project this way, then some of the team members are going to start to realize that the fire is of a slightly different nature. And it's not really that great, because maybe the project doesn't make any sense whatsoever at this point. And, you know, all that human potential, or that employer branding and hiring and the team that we've nurtured and put together so thoughtfully is just wasting their time. But you know, the morale drops, time's wasted, but we sort of struggle and suffer through it, and if we're lucky, eventually, maybe we'll ship something and even get paid at some point if we're lucky again. So I guess it's so good, right? I mean, we've done a good job. We deserve a pat in the back. I mean, we aligned with the client, built what they wanted. Well, we got paid. At least the company got paid. We got to build our culture through the suffering. We learned a bunch about suffering, and we got people to grow through suffering, and but there are good things. We got to have some fun with new tech that we've just discovered. We were proud of our code, and we were even prouder with our process that we got to experiment with and spend God knows how much time on. But basically, it's total success as far as we're concerned. Is it? I mean, on our end it is. Maybe the founder had to go back to his day job to pay off their credit card debt, and maybe his wife also had to. I mean, by this time he might not have a wife anymore, but maybe she had to get back to work as well. I hope everything's good with their kids, but I mean, it sort of happened year after year after year because we were focusing where the places I worked at, we're focusing on doing stuff the best way possible. Great code, great design, stuff like that. But it's sort of like didn't register the end of that story because we didn't have enough time for it to register because there was another guy, and here's my brilliant idea. So we rinse and repeat. So we scoped, we solved, built, failed, profit was made, and repeat. So I was just wondering, have we actually succeeded or have we failed? I mean, if we failed, then who's to blame? We had Agile, we had Scrum. We've done a great job. The code was great, the design was great. The idea made sense, I guess. But maybe it didn't. Maybe it was client's stupid idea. God forbid it's not on us to fail. I mean, it's the universe for sure. But maybe it's the actual setup. Maybe it's all the whole kind of setting for this deal. Maybe that was problematic. So let's get back to my great circular pyramid for a second. And as we know, the software house story is focused and centered around technology. The product and the business is mostly client stuff. I mean, whatever you come up with. It's not like we don't like stupid ideas if you have a lot of money, so that's fine. In product company, however, they're focused on everything. And it's sort of revealing in itself because it's difficult. I mean, it must be tiring to be focused on everything at the same time, all the time. And I know that obviously in bigger companies, there's just more people to be focused on. But when the startups are starting, they have to be focused on everything. Everyone, the co-founders and whatnot, they need to be focused on everything. So it actually leads to some issues. And obviously, one of those issues is time. We have limited time, limited runway, time defined by money probably, in which we need to build the team. We need to suffer through 4 stages of team development, 5 dysfunctions of a team, and I don't know what else. We need to fix the team. We need to gain expertise in the domain that we're trying to innovate in. We need to build technology, finally, that's like the 5th point. Fix that technology because it failed, and raise money, experiment. And the problem with money is that it usually runs out. I mean, it's not always like that. People get lucky sometimes, but that's what usually happens. So how to fix this? I mean, those problems are prevalent, they're popular. I mean, those things happen all the time, much more often than we hear about them. So people were trying to fix this for a long time. There were incubators. They're trying to help entrepreneurs to build ideas. There are accelerators. There are what I call VCs with benefits, so investors that are also giving you something more. It was called smart money like 15 years ago. And there are venture studios, which is more popular right now, which is basically like software houses that actually got to figure out how to build their own ideas. And I've been focusing on how to fix those problems for last year and a half at a company that I call Arabella, where I'm managing partner. And we've been trying to experiment with different models and figure out how to help entrepreneurs and startups and maybe even corporations build new businesses and new products to avoid most of those painful problems. I'm coming from startup house world. That's how I got to find out how does it work exactly on the other side. And my partners are coming from venture and product world. So we kind of get to see the world from both sides and figure out how to fix it if it's possible, because obviously lots of people say that it's just not possible. You need to have everyone in one room, you need to spend enough time, and that's just the only way to make startup work. But I'm trying to find some other ways too, because I feel it's worthwhile. So let me share with you some problems that we identified as most painful, and the things that are simply lacking in the setup that's more classic, one or the other, and how have we tried, or how are we trying to fix them deliberately, and those problems are, this list is far from complete. Problems are intertwined. It's difficult to figure out where one problem ends and where the other starts, but let me just list the ones that I feel are most important. So goal and incentive alignment. This is one of the fundamental problems with the setup where you pay for having something built, because there are different motivations, and they inevitably lead to just different outcomes. Trust is also lacking very often, and that just makes work difficult and inefficient. Usually there's not enough transparency and skillful communication, and I mean skillful communication specifically. It's not enough to be transparent, it's not enough to communicate. Communicating is really difficult if we want to make it clear, and it requires serious work on the team, on everyone on the team separately, on the team as a whole. Usually there is no seat at the table for someone who provides services for the business discussions. Like, we are leading the business, this is our this is our thing, we're making decisions, and maybe if you're lucky you get to know what they are and build based on that. And freedom to make decisions across the board, and I will go into that a little more in a second. But what we usually start with, and what's the beginning of all or many of the problems, is the contract. So, in the classic code for money scheme, we have time and materials, we have our beloved fixed cost projects, we have agile variants that are more ambitious. We have, hopefully loosely defined scope in the contract. If at all, there might be roadmap, and even if we don't want to admit it, there are some dates usually, because someone came up with some great event, some date, something that needs to happen by April 1st. So this is a stage that's usually set up for not so great project. And let's examine what the vendor, what the goals of both sides are. So vendor's goal, by vendor I mean the software house or an agency or someone who delivers services to the business. Well, they want to work and bill as much as possible, and I don't imply anything sinister about it. It's just business. So if we can bill more and if we can work more, and if we can do good work, why not? That makes sense, provided we do good work. So they want to good work, but the problem is with understanding what the good work and what the outcomes really are. Well, developers will over-engineer because that's what they've been sold on. Employer branding showed you need to be a great engineer. It was a difficult interview to go through. So we need to show how great we are, what can we build. And what usually is built, if there's no other guidance, is something like that. I mean, it does have some purpose probably, but it's difficult to find a pocket that will fit in. But everyone needs to prove that they're good, and it's, by good code, it's great to have 5 layers of separation of something, but developers are not alone. There are designers who are going to also spend some time on it and come up with something like that for an aspiring startup. Everyone wants to be 21st century Picasso. That's great. Juniors will learn if we let them. Learning is good. Learning is always great, especially if client pays for that. Quality assurance folks will basically test everything that moves, and the things that don't move, they will make sure that they don't move throughout the duration of the project at least. And people will pick tools. some random, some cool because we haven't played with anything cool recently, some well-known because we don't want to learn anything, some other just very random. And if things go wrong product-wise, we will maybe look into the contract. Well, that's not really our problem, or look up to the client. Where's product leadership right now? What should we build, and so on and so forth. And it usually leads to one outcome. I mean, one of two. One is death. The other is, hey, why don't we just build more stuff? So even if that's just refactoring and throwing things away, that still requires some code. And that sort of setup is detrimental to the relationship in the long run, obviously, and it's sort of reinforcing that client-vendor relationship while everyone is talking that they're actually partners and we're partnering and everything is great, but with that, it's difficult to talk about partnership. So client goals, well, they want to pay as little as possible, duh. I mean, who would have paid too much? Who would have wanted to pay too much? They need money for other stuff if they're smart, so that makes sense. Let's get everything that was in the contract to a letter, even if it doesn't make sense anymore, because we've spent so much time negotiating this contract. So all that work could go to a waste if we don't build all that stuff that we negotiated. And we've heard some horror stories, and you're going to steal our IP for sure, the idea, the company, and I don't know what else. We need to get bang for the buck. We're tech-savvy businessmen, and we've told everyone that we're building that exactly, and we tell them when it's going to happen, and we have that great party, and that's exactly when it needs to happen. So both parties are set for first attempt in learning, and that's tough because everyone tried their best and everyone had their best intentions, so that's difficult. So how does the incentive alignment looks like? What we've been trying to experiment with? Well, obviously, like everyone says, it's partners and clients, but problem is what that really means and what the difference really is in the relationship. So what we try as much as we can is to find partners that are willing to share some of the upside with the project. And that upside might mean equity, might mean revenue sharing, might mean something else. But basically what it is something else than just money for whatever we're building. We want the team and us to be incentivized by some long-term thinking so that they have the project's best interest in mind. And on the flip side, we need to be able to share some risks too. Maybe risk less profit, maybe breaking even, maybe even losing money on a project if we're that adventurous. And we and our partner needs to share long, mid, and especially short-term goals and distribute everything of that, maybe except the downside, if that's possible, except of the risks, throughout the team. Now, when we do that, we become someone else than the vendor, someone else than the software house in a classic setting. We become like a build partner, someone who's truly invested, and bad things are going to happen if we don't figure out the business well. So how does it differ from a classic setup? Well, we work and bill only as much as necessary because we realize that there's ads to be bought and there's other stuff and the budget is limited. So if we decided to work on the project, then it's in our best interest not to spend everything on technology. If it fails, then it doesn't matter. We are not going to have any more work. And if it succeeds, well, then everything is possible. One of the startups that we've built some time ago acquired the whole team essentially at some point. We do effective work that's corresponding to the business goal. But by effective, I mean we're not doing greatest architecture ever or whatever. We incur technical debt, but wisely, meaning that we will cut corners if we realize what the risks involved are, what the life cycle, what the life of that product that we're building right now is going to be like. Is it going to be a prototype? Is it going to be rebuilt anyway after we raise more money? Because maybe that's the best way to do. So we're not trying to design something huge or overly complicated if we don't have to. We build only what's needed. The QA makes sure that only some things needs to be actually tested. We pick the right tools for the job. If someone think can be integrated with Zapier or something, why don't we build custom software for that? Just doesn't make any sense at some point. At some point, obviously, it does for performance and other stuff. So we try to use boring tools, low code, no code, if possible, just to make sure that it actually makes sense. And we design for outcome, not for dribble, just to share how great our designs are. We try to enjoy as much as possible bias for action. So we have to be in that setup proactive and suggest things and guide the client and the rest of the team, the partner obviously, and go above and beyond. We build pitch decks, we meet investors, we connect the founders with people that they need connected with, and it actually builds great self-perpetuating relationship, because otherwise we would build something that will end very, very badly. I'm speeding up. So what are venture goals or the business goals in that case? Well, first of all, what we're looking for is that client admits that they don't know everything, and whatever they say is assumptions, thesis, things that we are going to test or experiment with. They're actually coming to us or other companies like us just for expertise and to be able to have someone who's going to guide them, not just someone who's going to create code for months on end. We need to set achievable goals collaboratively and be flexible as things change. That's even though, I've been trying to explain agile and time and materials pricing for years and years. Some people just nod their heads and are surprised at the end. So we're sharing risk and opportunity and get down to work as soon as it makes sense, but not earlier. Some clients are not ready to build things, and I think it gives it gives big boost in trust when you say to someone that it's not yet, not now, you need to wait for a little bit. And they need to truly care for the relationship, because that's even more important than the business itself sometimes, if it works. How we build trust, because it's easy to say that, you just need trust and everything is going to be great. That doesn't mean anything, and it's not helpful. So what we're trying to do is also have really multidisciplinary talent behind the wheel, someone who is able to talk to everyone and every stakeholder on every level comfortably, even if they just code or something like that. We educate to sell the approach, meaning that, that's not how it's built. It needs to be different. People appreciate that if we're honest with them. And even if we say no, doesn't make sense, they appreciate that even more. And just being, like I said, an expected advocate for not doing those things or not building more is something that really gains a lot of trust. But we also need to be open about what happens if the project succeeds. I mean, it's difficult to scale business if you're working with an outside partner, so you need to have a strategy on that. And you need to have entrepreneurs on the team. That's the thing. You can't just have people who are focused on just one thing, and maybe they are just designers or just developers, or someone who doesn't have that entrepreneurial feeling inside them, that doesn't understand what needs to be done when. It's difficult to make decisions if they don't have to. We're trying to lower the entry barrier and the risk initial arrangement. What I mean by that is we split the engagement into something that the client and us can very easily get out of if it doesn't make sense, but we don't spend too much time on writing contracts. We either build trust quickly or we don't do it at all, because otherwise it's just too much hassle. And we show up. The workshops that we start with, and I'm glad to see that more and more companies are doing those workshops with clients to better define what's to be built. We're doing that religiously, just because, but maybe for different reasons sometimes. For us, it's more to build the relationship. If we work remotely, it's so important for everyone to know, what does this wins mean? What does someone mean what they're saying on the other end of the hangout? That just doesn't work if you don't spend a couple of days together, don't go for a beer or a meal or anything like that. I mentioned that what is also required is seat at the table. to provide insights and to be able to share what's going on in the team. That communication is crucial. I cannot really see any successful project where there's just telephone game going on and there's a PM and there's a product person and the stakeholders are completely disconnected from what's happening. It's very similar to what Gojko said about the reporting stuff. I mean, we had to have that conversation going all the time and when we build something completely new. Obviously, that gives us the forum to voice the concerns and opportunities. By opportunities, I mean if someone sees that there's a library doing something else, something that we wanted to build ourselves, and it's custom, and it is just the developer at the end of the line, he should be able to speak out loud and say that, hey, let's don't build it, or it's coming in the next month, or something like that. How on earth are we going to surface those informations to the stakeholder otherwise? We want to share the knowledge, the experience, and the networks with partners. We don't want to just sit on our asses and, okay, that does make sense, but let's just continue and move on. And boost team morale because they're all on board. What's truly important is being able to make decisions across the board. And I actually mean that with context across the board. That's what I said, that we need to have that we need to be in the position to understand the long-term goals, because we are able to say then, and developers are able to basically connect both the business strategy and the tactics and with basically the code that they're building, the curly braces and pixels in designer's case, and back and say, hey, this doesn't make sense, or I found this great thing. Like, maybe if we use this technology, Apple is going to feature us on App Store, or Google in their Play Store if we use Flutter or something like that. This information we cannot expect to come from the business stakeholders, but it has truly enormous impact, or can have enormous impact on the successful on the project being successful or not. And like I said, it's impossible to have a setup where we have a rigid structure and we don't work as one team. Communication, like I said, the workshops are necessary. And something that people, often forget about it is that we work with our brains, and our brains are really prone to being influenced by emotions. And if we don't take care of the emotions, the work is not great. So, it might sound warm and fuzzy, but it's really important to meet and talk and discuss things that are different than just code and stuff like that with the people on the other side, quote unquote. So if people are empowered to ask questions, to say this is stupid and give, effective and frank feedback to the stakeholders, then it's difficult, but it's worthwhile. And it's not easy. It doesn't just happen. You cannot read a book and say, hey guys, from now on we do this. It requires maturity, role models in the team, and some deliberate training in communication specifically, I would say. But the good thing is that things accumulate. All the experience that you have, all the tools, those things can be repeated in next startup, in next idea. And this is something that's very hard to come by if you're a product company and if you build one thing all the time. We have a number of startups in healthcare industry in the US that we're working with right now, and we can see how much quicker we are if we have researched the tools previously, if we figure out the right processes, if we know exactly what that business domain requires from the product build. It's really, really game-changing. And like I said, people grow with that sort of communication much more than just specialists. They're not just becoming better developers, they're becoming, I would say, better and more versatile human beings. We share the network, we share investors, we share talent because we just get to see the business environment. We're not closed in that technology bubble with that sort of thing. And are able to really make difference. And we get better at working together, which is fire, I guess. So I don't think there's a time for Q&A, is there?